And welcome to the Tider Insider Signing Day Special presented by The Locker Room, downtown Tuscaloosa, home of the original elephant wear. I'm Gary Harris alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com. We're live inside the zone in Bryant-Denny Stadium. You heard Coach Saban talking about the difference in this year's signing day because it's coming off another signing period in December, and it's different for us as well. We're usually right here in the zone as we are today with the Red Elephant Club to break down another #1 recruiting class. That's been the standard over the past several years at Alabama, but this year the Crimson Tide not finishing the way that we have become accustomed to their finishing, especially here in the second signing period. But we're still going to be with you for the next hour to break down what went right and certainly for today what went wrong. And we'll look forward to giving you information on the players that signed with the Tide today and in December. We're also going to go live to the Malmore Athletic Complex to hear from Coach Saban. That, again, will be live a little bit later on in the show. He'll address the media and discuss this 2018 signing class. That should be coming up right around 4 o'clock. Well, Rodney, I just have to be honest, there was some disappointment today. We'll get to that, but let's start with the good. And the best of today had to be American Heritage quarterback down in Plantation, Florida, Patrick Certeyn Jr., committing early this morning. Let's hear from him.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be furthering my education at the University of Alabama.
And Rodney, before we move on to what else happened with Alabama not getting some guys, let's be clear, this is a major coup for the Tide. 3 months ago, if you'd asked the recruiting analysts, they would have said lock for LSU. His dad, a former Southern Mississippi Golden Eagle standout and NFL standout, Patrick Certeyn Jr., arguably the top cornerback in the class of 2018, and that's clearly a position of need for Alabama.
Absolutely. The secondary as a whole certainly was an area of need. They signed 3 outstanding players in the early signing period. Obviously, Saban Smith, Jalen Armour-Davis, Joshua Jobe, 3 outstanding prospects. Today they get 2. You mentioned Patrick Certeyn. Now, he's the #1 corner in the country according to most people, Gary. 6'2", 190. He's got great size, great athletic ability. Also got Eddie Smith. I know we'll talk about him later from Slidell, Louisiana. So when you look at the defensive backfield, especially when you're talking about corners, Alabama did an outstanding job.
Now, as far as the national highlights on ESPN, as far as the press conferences and the announcements, for Alabama, that was pretty much it. The Crimson Tide held out hope this afternoon for Pensacola wide receiver Jacob Copeland, but it did not go the Tide's way.
For the next 3 to 4 years.
Copeland committed to Florida, but look at his mother. In the Alabama sweatshirt in the Tennessee toboggan, she just gets up and leaves, and she does not hide her disgust. We've seen this before. I feel bad for the young man. It's his day, not hers. She did, though, return a few minutes later to give him a hug, but clearly she did not want Copeland going to the Gators. And neither did the Alabama coaching staff, Rodney, for that matter. This is a guy, because of the way the dominoes had fallen, Alabama really would have liked to have picked him up and had the opportunity to look at him at wide receiver and possibly even in the secondary.
Yeah, he's a very athletic guy that's versatile, Gary. And I think, too, when you team that with the loss, and I know we're going to probably talk about Justin Ross from Phoenix City, who we really thought from Central High School would end up at Alabama as a wide receiver, chose Clemson instead. When you see that they lost him, you look at Jacob Copeland and think he could come in and be a part of this wide receiver class.
Yeah, it's not the way Alabama wanted to finish, and we're looking at some of the other guys that chose. There's Nick Pettit-Ferrer, the offensive tackle out of Tampa. You saw Tyson Campbell, Certeyn's teammate. Very disappointing this afternoon. Justin Ross going to Clemson over Alabama, the in-state receiver, the top player in the state of Alabama. Also Malik Langham this afternoon going to Florida, the defensive lineman from Huntsville Lee. Bobby Brown this morning choosing Texas A&M over Alabama. Listen, we're used to Alabama doing very well, but we have to tell it like it is. Doesn't mean they haven't had a good class. Doesn't mean it's still not the best program in the country. But today, Alabama did not finish the way we're accustomed to seeing Alabama finish.
No, they really didn't. You know, like you mentioned, though, it is an outstanding class overall. There's no question about that. It's going to be possibly a top 5 class as we see it right now. We're still waiting on a decision from Jalen Waddell out of the Houston area, a fantastic wide receiver, punt returner. And, you know, Gary, but you're right. I mean, and here's the thing. They had some coaching changes. I think that hurt. I think Jeremy Pruitt going to Tennessee hurt some. I really believe that had Jeremy Pruitt stayed here, they certainly would have gotten a top linebacker in J.J. Peterson, who ended up at Tennessee with Pruitt. Possibly could have gotten Quay Walker, who was committed for a long time, signed with Georgia today. You know, again, when you have coaching changes, sometimes
it can affect
the relationships.
And it hurt. But as we said, Alabama did pick up Patrick Certeyn Jr. That's huge. Here's what Certeyn Jr. had to say about choosing the Crimson Tide over LSU.
Why Alabama? Because, you know, it's a culture over there. You know, they win championships. And, you know, over here, we used to winning. So I want to be a part of that winning culture.
Okay, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but again, let's be clear. Alabama's got 5 secondary players going to the NFL Combine. They're losing a lot of guys, and that's not to mention Hootie Jones as well. This is a position where a guy like Certeyn Jr., I know he's a true freshman, he might step in and play from day one,
I think
potentially.
There's a great opportunity when you're talking about a secondary player. We mentioned it last night on our TV show, Tider Insider TV, that, you know, if you're a defensive back, cornerback especially, you've got a great opportunity. You're losing both corners, losing both safeties, and they play all these packages. You have nickel packages where you have 5 DBs on the field. You have the dime when you have 6. So a lot of opportunities, Gary, for these guys.
All right, Rodney, we're just getting started here on our National Signing Day Tider Insider Special presented by the Locker Room. Certeyn Jr. was not the only Alabama signee today. We'll break down the rest of the class. Plus, the good news is today's signees just a small portion of the entire 2018 class. And let's don't forget, Alabama had a very good early signing period in December. We'll talk about what happened, about 6 weeks ago. And, of course, again, we will go live to the Mount Moore Athletic Complex for the Nick Saban Signing Day press conference. As soon as the coach steps to the podium, we will take you there. The Tider Insider Signing Day Special. We'll be right back. You stay with us. We're live inside the zone in the north end zone of Bryant-Denny Stadium, the Red Elephant Club recruiting extravaganza. And we're right in the middle of it with our 1-hour Tider Insider TV Signing Day Special presented by the Locker Room, downtown Tuscaloosa, home of the original elephant wear, just like Rodney and I are wearing today. Get by and see them in person or shop online. Okay, Rodney, some breaking news. And hey, man, let's go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Good news for Alabama. Jalen Waddell, the wide receiver out of Texas, the Houston area, signing or committing to sign with Alabama. We expect that he'll fax in his signing papers any moment now. This kid is a electric type player. For those people that remember back as far as David Palmer,
absolutely.
He can do a lot of different things. And after losing Justin Ross and the decision maybe not to pursue Seth Williams from right here in Tuscaloosa at Bryant High School in the early period, I never call anybody a must-get, but this was a big, big pickup for Alabama.
Huge.
Yeah.
It really was big because this guy is a difference maker. I think he's the most dynamic player in the country with the ball in his hands. This guy is a guy that can come in as a slot receiver. Watch him here. The unbelievable ability to stop, start, change directions. He's got great speed. I think he's got Amari Cooper type acceleration. Look at him run away from defenders here. I'm telling you, that's top-notch competition in the Houston area that he's playing against. This guy is big time.
You know, someone on Twitter, when I put it out that Ross picked Clemson today, and he was like, well, that's probably because Alabama's loaded at receiver. Talking about the 3 freshmen, Judy, Ruggs, and Smith. That doesn't matter. I mean, you don't want more. And as many as they potentially could play now, opening up the offense, you got to get guys that can make plays in this day and age of college football. And as you said, that's what this kid is. Man. He's a playmaker. Get the ball in his hands and watch him work.
Put him in the slot. I mean, Gary, he can make big plays as a receiver. We had some punt return coverage there where, again, I mean, this guy, when you look at him, I think he's the best in America at what he does. He's a guy that Alabama had the lead on from early in the summer. And, you know, it got a little bit scary there with what Jimbo Fisher's doing at Texas A&M coming in. So
I was nervous.
Huge pickup.
Yeah, so Jalen Waddell to Alabama. That is a nice pickup in this class of 2018. Okay, we obviously broke down Certeyn earlier, but Alabama did sign a few other guys today. Let's discuss Eddie Smith, Jalen Moody, and Michael Parker. Let's begin with Eddie Smith, because you and I have talked about him. A lot of comparisons to Eddie Jackson, because when Eddie Jackson came out of South Florida, everybody knew he was a good player, but it wasn't like everybody was jumping up and down saying he was a 5-star. He might have been one of the better defensive backs to come through here, Rookie of the Year candidate with the Chicago Bears. Eddie Smith, you really like out of Slidell, Louisiana, as a cornerback, and a guy you think that may match up with Certeyn Campbell's and other in this class.
Absolutely, Gary. Look at him. He's long, he's athletic, he's a really outstanding kid, too. That means a lot. And I think, Gary, when you look at him, you mentioned Eddie Jackson. The comparison really is about he's underrated.
Right.
He's a guy that's a
different players, but
right. He's
yeah.
a 3-star player. If you look at the recruiting services, he's a lot better than that. I mean, this guy's an outstanding talent. I think he's going to be very valuable to the program. And again, he's a guy that can come in with his ability and really challenge.
Okay, big pickup there. Big pickup with Certeyn. Huge pickup with Waddell this afternoon. Inside linebacker, Alabama wanted to get an inside linebacker in this class. In this late signing period, Quay Walker committed for a long time, flipped to Georgia. Patrick Peterson might have been an Alabama signee had Jeremy Pruitt not left for Tennessee. But Alabama settled on Jalen Moody out of South Carolina. And the reason I say settled is he's not a guy we heard a lot about, but some have compared him to Sean Dion Hamilton while we're making comparisons here.
Yep. You know, when you look at him, he's 6'2", he's 230, Gary. Look at him, the way he reads and diagnoses his play. He may not be the fastest guy on the field. He might not be the fastest linebacker, but he's a guy that can read and diagnose. He's very smart, very instinctive football player, and he makes football plays.
He does, and at linebacker, that's what you're looking for. And you know, he's as you said, he's got a nose for the football. He's got instincts. He's not the biggest. He's not the fastest. But Alabama's got a lot of big, fast athletes. We saw when Sean Dion Hamilton went out the last couple of years what leadership means. It took Alabama to adjust a while to him being out. You need guys that also understand how to play football and how to lead your team.
Look, you can look at this video here and see how physical he is. When you're talking about a physical brand of football, that's what Alabama plays. He's hard-nosed. And again, when you talk about combining all of those qualities together that we mentioned earlier, the natural instincts as a football player, the mental toughness, the physical toughness, I think all of those things are very important when you start to evaluate Jalen Moody.
And because that Alabama missed on some prospects today, Michael Parker, the tight end out of Westminster Christian in Huntsville, good-looking athlete, strong family connection here to Alabama. He's about 6'6", 225, 30 pounds already, can run. He might have had to delay his enrollment otherwise, but because there's openings today, he is signing and is going to be able to enroll. And listen, this kid's a good football player, and tight end's a position that Alabama continues to stress that they want to use more and more in their offense.
Well, Gary, you know, I know you've always liked basketball players.
I do.
And when you look at Michael Parker, he is a basketball player, 6'6", 230, very athletic, a guy with good hands, can move well, and to be honest with you, he was going to be a blue shirt, a guy that would delay his entry, as you mentioned. But because of the opportunity, now he can sign. And you look at the frame, he's athletic, he can fill out. You know, again, we know he's a sleeper-type player, but you can see the kind of ability that he has, just the athleticism.
Yeah, 6'6" and long arms. I mean, that makes a big difference in today's game when a lot of times quarterbacks are, you know, getting one-on-one matchups, and they're going to the tight end even if he's covered. And it's up to that guy to make a play. He has the potential to do that. So Alabama not signing the numbers today that the Crimson Tide had hoped to sign in this class, but getting Waddell this afternoon is huge. Getting Certeyn, and arguably the best combination along with Smith, the quarterbacks in the country. And you know, it's going to be a quality class. And, of course, we have all the early signees from December that we'll get to. But you already alluded to, and I know everybody says, well, as long as Saban's here, and I say that too. He's the architect. You know, he's the guru. But when you have coaching changes every year, as you talk about with relationships, it affects your recruiting. There's no doubt that Jeremy Pruitt wanted Tennessee, Derek Ainsley leaving, maybe even the offensive coordinator leaving, Dable, has affected recruiting to some degree.
Anytime you have turnover, it certainly does not help when you're talking about relationships and the guys that you've been recruiting. But You know, I think the thing you need to focus on in that regard is when you look ahead, Gary, and we've discussed some of the new assistant coaches, their great recruiting reputations. You're talking about like Carl Scott in the secondary with the safeties and corners. Jeff Banks, as special teams coordinator, got tremendous ties. Josh Gaddis, the new wide receivers coach, is a guy that did a fantastic job at Penn State recruiting and developing their players, but also recruiting outstanding players. So these guys have relationships all over, and they're going to open more doors for Alabama. And they're young, they're aggressive. There's kind of a new blood on the staff.
Mike Locksley, we're expecting him, still not official, but we're expecting him to slide into the play calling role. He's been a very active recruiter for Alabama. There's no doubt about that. Your thoughts on him taking over the play calling and his impact on this recruiting class for Alabama?
Well, I think when you look at Mike Locksley, he's had a lot of success in different ways. He's had a couple of teams where he's been the offensive coordinator that led the Big Ten in rushing, a couple of years at Illinois. He had one that led the league in passing. So he is going to be a guy that, Gary, when you look at him, has a lot of experience having a balanced offense, strong running, which is what Nick Saban wants, but certainly a fast up-tempo. I think you're going to see a lot of up-tempo with Mike Locksley.
All right. Well, Rodney, there is reason for optimism for this class. It's going to be a top 10 class, and, you know, it actually got started back on December the 20th. That was the early signing period. We'll go back and discuss those 16 players and how they play into Alabama's system. TITV's Signing Day Special, live from the Zone inside Bryant-Denny Stadium. We'll return right after this short timeout. Flashback to December 20th. This is big defensive lineman Stephon Wynn out of the IMG Academy in Florida. He signed with Alabama along with 14 others back in the early signing period. And welcome back to Tighter Insider TV's Signing Day Special, being presented by the Locker Room in downtown Tuscaloosa, home of the original elephant wear. And welcome back, everybody. At the time Alabama was preparing for the Sugar Bowl, Nick Saban has made his thoughts clear on the early signing period. He's not a fan, but he did talk about his excitement for the 15 players that he signed back in December. We'll go back to his comments in today's Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports Coach Talk.
Early signing period, I guess, is some kind of an indication of what kind of recruiting that you're doing. We're very pleased and happy with the 15 players that we were able to sign.
And, Rodney, we certainly broke down that early signing class for Alabama on Tighter Insider TV back in December. You did it at TighterInsider.com, and I think most of our Alabama fans are certainly aware of it. But on a day like today that's certainly been mixed a little bit, I think it's important to remember that the entire signing class is what you're looking at. And Alabama had a very productive early signing period.
They really did. And, you know, like you said, Gary, I think everyone wants to finish fast. That leaves a lasting impression. But when you look at this class as a whole, I mean, you start on the defensive side. We've talked about the needs on the defensive line. You got the best pass rusher in the country, Ayabi Anoma.
Yeah, he's
this guy's
time.
Dynamite. I mean, he's unbelievable coming off the edge. 24 sacks this past season. Look at him there. Number 9 chasing down the quarterback. You've got on the other side Jordan Davis, another top pass rusher, had 22 sacks. Cameron Letu is a guy from the state of Utah. It's one of the top players out on the West Coast. It's a great pass rusher. This guy's about 6'5", 230, can get a lot bigger in terms of adding weight. 2 interior guys. You talked about Stephon Wynn there, and also Christian Barmore, who's one of the fastest rising defensive tackles in the country, 6'6" and over 300 pounds. So, you know, Gary, when you talk about the front players, they did an excellent job.
Yeah, Barmore is another interesting player because that's one that Alabama didn't know if they were going to get Barmore or not. And today, when you've lost out on a couple of defensive linemen, to be able to go back and say, remember this guy, as you said, 6'6" and close to 300 pounds, he has the potential to play early.
He does. There's no question. Now, look, Alabama certainly would have liked to have gotten another defensive lineman or two. I think that would have been great for this class. It didn't happen. But these guys we're talking about certainly are outstanding players. When you combine those guys with the secondary guys, you know, Gary, when you've got pass rushers and you got corners that can cover like that, that's the foundation of your defense.
We're also looking live at the podium inside the Melmore Athletic Complex, the Naylor Stone Media Room. We'll take you there as soon as Saban comes up. Speaking of defensive backs, because we got the 2 corners today that we've talked about at Alabama, let's don't forget about an in-state product that signed early. Jalen Armour Davis out of St. Paul's Episcopal down in Mobile. This is kind of the Dre Kirkpatrick mode, long and lean, and can really lock down a wide receiver.
Very, very versatile player, Gary. He was an outstanding high school player, not only on defense, but on offense. A big playmaker as a receiver, a guy that's got a lot of versatility, could play corner, could play the star position, could end up a safety. Guy that maybe has to get a little bit bigger in terms of adding some weight, some strength, but he's got all the tools.
And Jalen Waddell can make plays. Let's don't forget about this little guy, Slade Bolden out of Monroe, Louisiana.
Absolutely.
You could put him in the slot. You could put him in the backfield. I mean, he is just an electric playmaker as well.
You know, Gary, again, this is a guy that before Brian Dable left to the Buffalo Bills, he really liked this guy. He's a guy that you look at some of the New England Patriots slot receiver type guys, he kind of fits that mold. Some people have compared, now I'm not saying he's Christian McCaffrey, but he has that kind of feel to him, that kind of versatility. Guy that played high school quarterback, Gary, over 4,000 yards this year, 110 career touchdowns. 110.
It's a lot of scores.
Guy's productive.
Earlier you mentioned Jordan Davis to go along with all the great pass rushers Alabama has. Let's not forget about Jordan Davis. He committed early. Alabama had to fight to hang on to him. But he's another one of these guys. He's good already, but when he fills out physically, look out.
Yeah, another outstanding pass rusher. I mentioned he had 22 sacks this past season. Guy that's really long, athletic. Another guy at 6'4", 6'5", around 240. So you know he's going to get bigger and got. When you team him with some of these other pass rush types that they've got, Alabama's got several really outstanding outside guys.
You know, defensive line is always important. So is the offensive front. I don't know that anybody in the country recruits better on the offensive line than Alabama year in and year out. They recruit great players. They recruit depth. They picked up a couple really good ones in the early period. Tommy Brown, a tackle out of California, and Emil Ekiyor, a center out of Indianapolis, Indiana.
Yeah, Emil Ekiyor, Gary, when he was committed to Michigan for a long time, and he's an interior player, probably a center, could be a guard too. He could play either guard spot. The guy's really powerful. He's played some tackle in high school. Now he doesn't have the frame to be a tackle. He's only about 6'3". So he's going to be an interior guy. But there you see, look at his base. You know, he's a really big kid, very strong, very physical. I really like Emil Ekiyor as an interior player.
And then you see Tommy there on the other side of your screen as Brandon has put up the split screen for us. So offensive line is an area where you have to take a lot of numbers because 5 of them play at a time. Sometimes there are injuries. Sometimes guys don't pan out. Alabama always looking good up front on the offensive line. And, of course, those offensive linemen like to run, block for great running backs. That's another area that Alabama just seems like it kills it every year. And Jerome Ford, in the early signing periods, we're breaking down the December signees, a running back out of Florida. Another one of these guys, maybe not a 5-star, but Alabama identified him, liked him a lot, and got a signing from him.
Let's remember, some of Alabama's biggest recruiting coups were guys that they discovered in camp. Amari Cooper. Nobody knew about Amari Cooper until he came to the Alabama camp and lit it up. Jerome Ford is a lot like Kenyon Drake. Look at him there. Look at that explosive speed. A guy that played some as a Wildcat quarterback. You saw him there. He played some at running back, played a lot at wide receiver, slot receiver, caught 800 yards worth of passes this year. So he's a guy that has a lot of versatility. They moved him around, used him in a lot of different ways. Really kind of raw as a running back, Gary, because he didn't play the position much in high school, but he'll be developed really well here at that position. Now, let me say this, too. I mentioned his versatility. He's an outstanding defensive player as well. I mean, he's a guy that when you look at him, he could be a safety if he played the other side of the ball.
And speaking of defensive backs, this has been maybe the best defensive back class in the country. And it started in December with Josh Jobe and Savion Smith.
Listen, Josh Jobe is in the same category with Patrick Certeyn and all the rest of the top corners in the country. And he was rated really highly, but probably didn't quite get the same kind of publicity. But he's an outstanding player. Originally from Miami, was committed to the Hurricanes, transferred his senior year to Cheshire Academy up in Connecticut, flipped to Alabama late. But an excellent pickup. And Savion Smith, the junior college transfer, started his career at LSU as a 5-star recruit, left, spent last season at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, top junior college player in the country. This guy joined the team for the bowl practice for Clemson and the Georgia games and practices, and I think that the buzz around here, Gary, is he's got special talent.
Yeah, and he's, as you said, he's already been in the SEC. He's played in the junior college ranks at maybe the top junior college in the country. So in Savion Smith, you're getting a guy that's a little more physically mature than someone straight out of high school.
And not only that, that's an outstanding point. Physically mature, but he's also mentally mature. He's a guy that's been around, knows what it takes, had the opportunity to get in here for those practices for the Clemson and Georgia games, and I think that helped him a lot.
We'll be going to Nick Saban as soon as he's at the podium. We're recapping the December signing period. Alabama was very productive back in December. Back to defense, or staying with defense, a couple of guys that can play linebacker, get after the quarterback. Cameron Latou from out west signs with Alabama, and also Jerez Parks, who had signed last year, deferred his enrollment. They're both coming in, both really good-looking athletes.
Yeah, Jerez Parks, we talked about him on last year's show.
Yeah.
A guy that stood up to commit to Alabama and signed with him. Alabama didn't have a scholarship for him. He was a top 100 player in the country out of Sebastian, Florida. He agreed to take a gray shirt. He was here for the bowl, for the Clemson and the Georgia practices. A guy that you mentioned, a tremendous outside linebacker type, could even grow into a defensive end. And who was the other one you mentioned? Cameron Latou. Yeah, out of the state of Utah.
Yeah.
He's an outstanding player, Gary. Again, I mentioned him. He's got great height, about 6'4", 235, can really fill out, could eventually become a defensive end.
Rodney, here's Nick Saban.
I really missed you. Look, we're really excited about the players that we were able to attract here in this recruiting class. I know this was a little bit different in terms of having an early signing date and then finishing up today, but we were pleased with the guys that we were able to attract. I think in every recruiting class, there's always a guy that you get that you thought you might not get, and there's also a guy that you thought you might get that you didn't get. And but overall, I think we solved a lot of needs in this class in terms of, and I think we had to recruit by need, especially we had to have a punter. All right, we needed to get some defensive backs because we've never lost this many guys at one position at one time. And I think we did a great job in that area. But there's a lot of hard work that goes into this recruiting by a lot of people. And we certainly appreciate the team that we have here at Alabama and the great effort that they all put in to try to make this class one that can really complement the players that we have now and, add to the future success of our team. That team starts with our assistant coaches who do a great job of identifying players, establishing relationships with players, putting a lot of time and energy into bringing it to fruition where we have an opportunity to sign a guy and get him to commit to coming to Alabama. But the team that we have here, starting with our president, Dr. Bell, our athletic director, Greg Byrne, the university community, the professors, the academic staff who spend a lot of time each weekend in helping us recruit, answer a lot of questions about academic circumstances for families is certainly appreciated. John Deaver does a great job on his side of the fence, and all the support staff that we have here, whether it's the medical staff, the strength and conditioning coaches, Miss Amy in nutrition, all these people do a fabulous job of answering questions and helping develop relationships with people to make them comfortable, because one thing that we do have here is a really strong family of people who work together, who stay together to help our players have a better chance to be successful. So we certainly appreciate the atmosphere that our fans create when players visit here for games. I think the energy, the enthusiasm, the tradition are all things that really help us be able to continue to attract character quality people who want to get an education, who want to be good people, who want to be the very best that they can as football players. So, as I alluded to before, when you sometimes it matches up in terms of how you get ranked and rated, and sometimes it doesn't. But you have to try to solve some of the needs that you have on your team. I think we were able to do that, in this particular class. So, I I think especially at DB, where we were able to, Patrick Certeyn is, probably at least he's ranked, as one of the top guys in the country at his position. Savion Smith is a top junior college guy at his position. We got 3 other guys, a top DB in the state, and Jalen Armour Davis. So, we felt really, really good about the 5 guys that we were able to attract at that position, and those guys are going to have a great opportunity to compete on our team. But as I say every year, you can't look at a puppy dog and look at his feet and know how big he's going to get someday. So the real evaluation of any recruiting class, and I've said this when we had number 1 classes, and I'm saying it now, that is really down the road in 2 or 3 years, how many of these guys really turn out to be really, really good players. And I think that from a coaching standpoint, that's what we want to try to do with every player, try to help them develop as players so that they have a chance to be successful here in their career, and we're going to continue to do that with the players that we're able to recruit today. So I really thank everybody out there that their hard work and energy goes into this each and every year. This recruiting has turned into pretty much a year-round process, and it's not just about recruiting this class, but it's next year's class and the class after that. The recruiting calendar has changed how we recruit, but the energy that a lot of folks put into this is certainly appreciated, and I'd like to thank everyone for that.
Okay. Coach, we'll start in the back with Cecil.
Coach, you mentioned in your remarks about relationships, and you did have, I suppose, a relatively large amount of staff turnover late in the process. Did that affect you at all with certain prospects, and how did you feel about that as you were out?
Well, I don't think there's any question about the fact that there may be some prospects out there that were being recruited by somebody who left, and maybe that was a little bit of an issue with them, but I do think that the coaches that we hired certainly did a great job of going out there and trying to develop relationships with the players that we were recruiting. So in some cases, maybe it had an effect, but in other cases, I don't think it did. So I can't really answer that emphatically to tell you whether it did or didn't. But I think in recruiting, especially when you start recruiting guys, 2 years in advance, that when they feel comfortable and develop relationships with people, it certainly can have some effect on, how comfortable they feel with the other folks.
Go here in the middle with Michael.
Just wondering, how many guys did you expect to sign today, and what did you guys learn about the early recruiting cycle and how it impacts the whole flow of things?
Well, I think every year is going to be different with the recruiting cycle. I think this year was probably a little different because there were so many coaching changes. So those coaching changes were much more aggressive in the late signing period because they got their staffs together and in some cases created new opportunities for players that but maybe next year won't be that way. So you could say, well, if you'd have signed more guys early, it would have been better this year, but maybe next year it wouldn't be. But I do think that it does accelerate the recruiting calendar. I think you have to have more guys visit early. You got to get on top of people early. If they're going to early sign, you got to identify that and recruit to that timetable. And the guys that are going to, stay until the end, you certainly have to be very conscious of doing a good job with those guys as well. So, I think that we've all kind of grown to understand that, commitments don't really mean a whole bunch in a lot of cases. So I don't think you can judge things based on that because guys just continue to visit, so they're really not committed. And then when they find something else that they like better, then they're not committed. So we don't put a lot of pressure on guys to commit, and we continue to recruit guys whether they are or they aren't. And I think a lot of other people try to manage it the same way.
Right side here with Chandler.
I'm wondering what specifically you see in Patrick Certeyn Jr. that's got you excited, and obviously he has a lineage with his father. Do you see maybe some of the shades of him on that field as well?
Well, his dad was a great player and was actually on the Dolphin team when I took the job there, and was a free agent and went off, but was a great player for many, many years. And Patrick's a little longer type guy, kind of guy we like here, and very instinctive player. He's got good long speed, uses his length well. He's got good ball skills, good ball judgment, can play man-to-man, not afraid to get up and press people. That's a good style for him, and that's our style here. So we're excited about having him in the program and really looking forward to working with him.
You guys had 16 early enrollees last year, I think 4 this year. What are some of the factors that maybe contributed to where
Well,
you're swinging?
we had 5 this year, so but 16 was probably a little bit of an anomaly. Most of the time we've had between 7 and 9 has been pretty average for, mid-year enrollees. But I don't think we don't make a judgment or a decision on a player based on whether he's a mid-year enrollee or not. So you recruit the guys that you feel meet the criteria for what you want at positions. Sometimes those guys are mid-year guys, and sometimes they're not. Last year there were a lot of guys that we were recruiting that were. This year, not as many. Guy's got to have all the academic qualifications when he's a mid-year guy, and there are some schools out there that won't even allow guys to graduate at mid-year. All right, so this is not something that we say, okay, because this guy's a mid-year guy, we want to recruit him so we can get more mid-year guys. That's not something we really do. So it's a circumstance that we don't really totally control. We don't really try to talk guys into being mid-year guys. There are advantages if they want to do it in terms of their college development, because they're going to be here in a time where they have more time to adjust socially, academically, as well as to learn what to do from a football standpoint, because they can go through spring practice and off-season program and all that. So I don't know how to answer that question because it's not a part of the evaluation process.
Just wondering what your thoughts are on some of the defensive linemen you were able to get, and how does that sort of address your needs on the team?
Well, we're actually hoping to maybe get one more defensive lineman in this class. We feel really good about the 2 guys that we got. Stephon Wynn is a really good player, big power guy. Barrymore is, the same, kind of guy. I think some of the outside backer type guys that we've recruited here in the past have become defensive linemen. So the fact that we got some really good guys at outside backer that have really good size and really good size potential may grow into something else, in their career here. But that's something that remains to be seen. But we feel really good about those 2 guys. Again, we'd probably, if we had our druthers, we'd have got one more guy at that position, and we'll continue to maybe look and evaluate and see if there's somebody out there that would help us.
On the left side with Tony. Coach, I've got 2. If you're able to comment on Jalen Waddell, I'd like your thoughts on him. You're good.
Yeah, okay. Well, the only reason I looked at him was we can't comment until we get the paperwork, and it was I guess we have.
Literally 10 seconds before you ask.
Okay.
There you go. Good timing.
Well, Jalen is an outstanding young man. I mean, really a good person. We had him in camp last summer. We've recruited him for a long time. He's got great quickness, change of direction, run after catch. Really an outstanding overall receiver, but would work really well for us in the slot. Has really good run after catch, speed sweep type of ability. So may be a little bit different than some of the guys that we have right now, which is a really good thing. I think receivers are a little bit like a basketball team. You got a point guard, you got a shooting guard, you got a power forward. I mean, all those different kind of guys really make a good receiving corps. So we're excited about him because great quickness, great change of direction, really, really hard to cover. And a great person.
And then, Secondly, this is the first year, I think, in 13 years that Alabama hasn't signed a quarterback. Just what went into that decision to not sign a quarterback this?
Well, I think that we'll probably have a quarterback join us some kind of way between now and then, which I don't think I can comment about. But look, when you have really good young players at a position, sometimes it's hard to attract another guy at that particular position. So I think you all know our circumstance at quarterback right now with the players that we have here and what grade they're in and how much more eligibility they have. So rather than, reach for somebody, we would rather try to solve the issue maybe a different way with maybe a more experienced guy down the road. And, certainly think that next year we might be in a position to get a really good player at that position who could be someone who could impact us in the future.
Got two more. Alex, then we'll finish up with Cecil.
You spoke about needs and addressing a lot of them. Obviously, defensive backs you did well in. You mentioned wanting another defensive line. What were some positions that you maybe struck out at that you weren't certain you thought maybe you'd get better at than you did?
I really don't think we struck out anywhere, to be honest with you. Nothing comes out perfect because we don't control all these things. But, we'd have liked to got 2 inside linebackers. We got 1. So does that mean we struck out? No. We'd have taken another defensive lineman. We could have taken another offensive lineman. We got the right number of DBs. We got a punter. We redshirted a kicker from last year's class, what really counts in this year's class, so we couldn't really take a full class this year from a number standpoint. So I don't really, in a perfect world, if we could say we could recruit a perfect amount of players at every position, I think I've already mentioned the positions where if we could have got another guy, it would have sort of been our goal, let's say, starting out. Because every year we kind of put up how many guys we want to recruit at each position because we do have numbers issues that we have to deal with. So sometimes you can't really get those players because you have to, like we had to get a lot of DBs. We lost 6 guys. So 5 was the number, and we felt really good about the guys we got at that position. We got lots of guys at outside backer. The emphasis was to try to get defensive players. I think we got some good defensive players. So I don't think we struck out anywhere.
Finish up in the back with Cecil.
Coach, just to wrap up, obviously you've been doing this in the Southeastern Conference, I guess it's certainly as a head coach, longer than anybody. Is it equally tough as it was 15 years ago? Is it much tougher out there? Was this year particularly competitive with all the new coaches?
Well, I think it is very, very competitive. I think what's the most competitive thing we do around here is play a game. The next most competitive thing we do around here is recruit players, and that's the way it is. So, we won a lot of battles in this recruiting. I think, continuity helps you win battles in recruiting. Relationships help you win battles in recruiting. Guys seeing that they have an opportunity to contribute to your team. In some cases, maybe looking too much at where they can play early rather than where they can develop to be the best players. But I think all these things sort of contribute to so to say it's any easier to recruit now than it used to be, I can't really say that. I think when you have success and when you have continued success like we've had, you become the target sometimes, which I think makes it a little more difficult. People convince players that we have all these players and they can't play here. And I always use the example that we've had some really, really good left tackles here, all of them first or second round draft picks for the 11 years that we've been here. And there's only 1 year that player at left tackle did not start and play, and that's Cyrus Kwanjo's freshman year. Every other left tackle we've had has started as a freshman. All right, but if you get out there in recruiting, they act like we got 10 Cam Robinsons here. All right, we only had one. All right, and he played every down that he was here that he was healthy, and so did every other left tackle. So I think, you know, sometimes quality is misconstrued with quantity, but every player that we have here was told at some point in time in recruiting that they probably couldn't play here and they could play faster someplace else. But we attract the guys that are good competitors, that want to see if they can meet the standard of playing here with a lot of expectation and a great tradition, having a chance to play in big games. And at the end of the day, we're probably better off, you know, with those kind of competitors, and that's worked out really well for us.
Coach, that's all we got.
All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, Coach Saban, we'll come back with some thoughts on his thoughts from what he said today at the recruiting press conference. Also, a legacy quarterback will join the Tide next season as a preferred walk-on. We'll have the details. You'll recognize this young man's name. It's rainy outside, but spirits are high inside the zone here at the Red Elephant Club recruiting gathering. You're watching the Tider Insider TV Signing Day Special. We'll be right back after this.
Just the stories that he's told me, and I mean, he played there, so it's pretty special that I have a chance to go and play there, so it's pretty awesome.
That's Braxton Barker, son of former Alabama quarterback Jay Barker. He committed to the Crimson Tide as a preferred walk-on at the quarterback position. He played his high school ball at Spain Park in Hoover, and excited to follow in his dad's footsteps with the Crimson Tide. Well, Rodney, we just heard Nick Saban's comments, and I thought he was very honest. Excited about this class, certainly filled needs at defensive back. He did not lie. They would like to have signed an offensive lineman today, would have liked to have gotten another defensive lineman, maybe another receiver. That didn't happen, so there were some misses, but overall I think he's pleased, but at the same time maybe, as we said at the top, didn't quite finish as strongly as they would have liked.
Well, and I could tell he was extremely excited about Jalen Waddell.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, he spoke very highly of him. But also another thing, Alabama fans have asked quite a bit about the quarterback situation, taking a quarterback in this class. I thought his comment was real interesting, the way he addressed it about not reaching for a quarterback just to fill a spot, but maybe try to fill it in another way, as in a grad transfer, maybe this year. And then next year, you've got several top quarterbacks that I know Alabama's already recruiting. So you look forward to next year in terms of bringing in a big-time quarterback.
He was asked about staff continuity, and he admitted that relationships, as you said, are very important, and losing some coaches impacted recruiting.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about Jeremy Pruitt, and I think that's who he was talking about when he made that reference.
All right, Alabama, another signing class in the books. We'll find out in a couple years, as Coach Saban did 2 or 3, how good this class really turned out to be. Our Tider Insider Signing Day Special will continue right after this from here inside Bryant-Denny Stadium. Stay with us. And here's a look at the recruiting rankings as they stand right now. 24/7 Sports, ESPN, and Scout all at 6 for Alabama. Rivals down 1 notch at 7th. 24/7 Composites at 6. So Alabama just outside the top 5. I thought Alabama would wind up as a top 5 class, Rodney, maybe even as high as 3. It didn't happen. Your final thoughts on this particular 2018 signing class?
Well, I think it was really good. I mean, there were years that if Alabama would have had a top 6, 7 class, I mean, people would have celebrated. Now, you know, the mood's a little bit different after 7 straight #1 years. But again, an outstanding class, no question about it. You look at that secondary group, Gary, I'm going to say it's the best in the country.
There are today's signees: Patrick Certeyn Jr., Eddie Smith, Jalen Moody, Jalen Waddell. and Michael Parker. Okay, that's going to do it for our Tider Insider Signing Day special presented by the Locker Room. Downtown Tuscaloosa, home of the original Elephant Wear. Go by and see Alex or Rush and the folks in person. You'll enjoy yourself, or shop online at locker-room.biz. All right, so for Rodney Orr, producer Brandon Cameraman, director Jen Hamner, and our entire TITV Signing Day special crew, I'm Gary Harris. Catch me on the news at 5. So long, everybody.